The tires crunched against the gravel, and my heart raced faster than the engine as I pulled up to the cabin. I'd driven 3 hours from Chicago into the Wisconsin wilderness, chasing a weekend escape with my coworker, Ethan, who swore his family's lakeside retreat was paradise. But when the door swung open, it wasn't Ethan's boyish grin greeting. It was a man whose presence stole my breath. His name was Daniel, Ethan's father, and he stood there in a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, his silver-flecked hair catching the late afternoon sun. His eyes, a deep hazel, locked onto mine with an intensity that felt like a secret we hadn't yet shared. "You must be Liam," he said, his voice low and warm, like the crackle of a fire. I nodded, my throat dry, wondering why my pulse was hammering like I'd just run a marathon. Ethan had invited me to this cabin for a casual weekend of fishing, beers, and bonding. Our late-night chats at the office had turned into a friendship I cherished. He was 26, like me, with an easy laugh and a knack for making data analysis feel less soul-crushing. But standing there, shaking Daniel's hand, I felt something shift, like the ground beneath me wasn't as solid as I'd thought. His grip lingered a moment too long, and I wondered if he felt it too. The cabin was rustic, all wood and warmth, with a wide porch overlooking Lake Winnebago. Ethan bounded out, all energy, oblivious to the electric current I was trying to ignore. "Liam, you made it," he called, pulling me into a quick hug. Daniel watched us, his expression unreadable, before turning to grab my bag. "I'll show you to your room," he said, and I followed, hyper-aware of his broad shoulders moving ahead of me. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and old books. Daniel led me to a small guest room with a quilted bed and a window framing the lake. "Ethan talks about you a lot," he said, setting my bag down. "Says you're the only one who keeps up with his sarcasm." His smile was small, almost cautious, but it lit something inside me I couldn't name. I laughed, trying to shake off the feeling. "He's got plenty to spare," I said, but my eyes kept drifting to Daniel's hands, strong and steady, as he adjusted the curtain. Dinner was a blur of Ethan's stories about his college days and Daniel's quiet interjections, his voice carrying a weight that made me lean in. He was a widower, I learned, a retired architect who'd built this cabin himself after losing his wife 10 years ago. Ethan mentioned it casually, but Daniel's eyes darkened, and I felt an ache to know more. Why did he stay out here, alone, in this beautiful, isolated place? What was he hiding behind that calm exterior? As night fell, Ethan suggested a fire by the lake. We dragged chairs to the shore, the water lapping softly under a sky bursting with stars. Daniel joined us, a bottle of whiskey in hand, and poured us each a glass. "To new friends," he toasted, his gaze flickering to me. I clinked my glass against his, my fingers brushing his knuckles, and the warmth of the whiskey was nothing compared to the heat in my chest. Ethan, oblivious, launched into a rant about our boss, but I was only half listening. Daniel sat across from me, the firelight carving shadows across his face, and I couldn't stop wondering what it would be like to know him, really know him. Was this just a fleeting attraction, or something more? And why did it feel like he was watching me just as closely? By the time we headed inside, my head was spinning, and not just from the whiskey. Ethan crashed early, leaving me alone with Daniel in the dimly lit living room. He offered to show me the blueprints of the cabin, spread out on a worn oak table. As we leaned over them, our shoulders brushed, and I froze. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but my heart screamed otherwise. What was happening to me? And what did it mean that I didn't want it to stop? The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds outside my window. Ethan was already up, planning a fishing trip, but my mind was still tangled in last night's moment with Daniel. Why had his touch lingered in my thoughts, keeping me awake until dawn? I shook it off, pulling on a sweater and joining them in the kitchen. Daniel was at the stove, flipping pancakes. His movements precise, yet effortless. "Morning, Liam," he said, glancing over with a smile that felt like it was just for me. Ethan, scrolling through his phone, didn't notice, but I felt my face flush. "Hope you're ready to lose at fishing," Ethan teased, tossing me a mug. I forced a laugh, but my eyes kept drifting to Daniel, who was now pouring batter with a focus that made my chest tighten. The lake was calm, the air crisp as we set up on the dock. Ethan was all chatter, casting his line with exaggerated flair. But Daniel was quieter, showing me how to bait the hook with a patience that felt intimate. His fingers brushed mine as he handed me the rod, and I nearly dropped it. "You're a natural," he said, his voice low, and I wondered if he meant more than fishing. Back at the cabin, Ethan got a call from work, a project emergency, and announced he had to drive back to Chicago for the day. "You'll be fine with Dad, right?" he asked, already halfway out the door. I nodded, my stomach flipping at the thought of being alone with Daniel. Was this a chance to understand what was happening between us, or a recipe for trouble? Daniel suggested a hike to a nearby ridge, promising a view worth the climb. We trekked through dense forest, the path winding past streams and wildflowers. He talked about the cabin's history, how he'd built it as a refuge after his wife's death. "It's where I come to feel whole again," he said, his voice raw. I wanted to ask more about his grief, his solitude, but instead, I shared my own story, growing up in a small Ohio town, always feeling like I didn't quite fit. He listened, really listened, and when our eyes met, I felt seen in a way I never had. At the ridge, the view was breathtaking, rolling hills under a vast sky. We sat on a flat rock, sharing a thermos of coffee, and the silence between us was comfortable, charged. "You're different, Liam," he said suddenly, his gaze steady. "You see things others don't." My heart pounded. Was he talking about the view, or something deeper? I wanted to ask, but fear held me back. What if I was misreading this? What if I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross? That night, we cooked dinner together, the kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and herbs. Our movements synced effortlessly, like we'd done this 100 times. When our hands brushed, reaching for the same knife, neither of us pulled away. "Liam," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are we doing?" I froze, my pulse racing. What were we doing? And why did it feel like the answer could change everything? Ethan returned the next morning, oblivious to the tension humming between his father and me. I tried to act normal, laughing at his jokes, but every glance from Daniel felt like a spark. Was I falling for him? Or was this just the thrill of something forbidden? The question gnawed at me as we spent the day kayaking, the lake's rhythm doing little to calm my racing thoughts. That afternoon, while Ethan napped, Daniel asked if I'd help him fix a loose porch railing. We worked side by side, the summer heat making our shirts cling to our skin. His arm brushed mine as he handed me a hammer, and I caught his scentwood smoke and cedar. "You're good with your hands," he said, and the double meaning hung in the air. I laughed nervously, but my mind was screaming, "Say something. Tell him how you feel." But what if Ethan found out? What if this was all in my head? Dinner was tense, at least for me. Ethan talked about his girlfriend back in Chicago, and I noticed Daniel's jaw tighten. Was he jealous? Or was I projecting my own confusion? After Ethan went to bed, Daniel and I ended up on the porch, the night air cool against my skin. He poured us whiskey, and we sat in silence, the lake's soft ripples filling the space. "I haven't felt like this in a long time," Daniel said finally, his voice heavy. My heart stopped. "Like what?" I asked, barely breathing. He looked at me, his eyes raw with something I couldn't name: fear, desire, maybe both. "Like I'm alive," he said. The words hit me like a wave, and before I could stop myself, I reached for his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady, and for a moment, the world was just us. But then headlights flashed Ethan, Back from a late-night drive to the gas station. We pulled apart, guilt flooding me. What were we doing? This was his father, my friend's dad. Yet as Daniel's gaze lingered, I knew I couldn't walk away from this feeling, no matter how dangerous it was. The next day was torture. Every moment with Daniel was charged. Every glance a silent question. Ethan, still clueless, suggested a group hike, and I agreed, hoping the distraction would clear my head. But walking beside Daniel, our hands brushing as we navigated the trail, only made things worse. I wanted to tell him everything, how he made my heart race, how I'd never felt this way before, but Ethan's presence was a constant reminder of the line we were flirting with. That night, Ethan got a call from his girlfriend, and he stepped outside to talk. Daniel and I were alone again, washing dishes in the kitchen. The silence was heavy, and I couldn't take it anymore. Daniel, I said, my voice shaking. What is this? What are we doing? He set down the plate he was drying. His eyes locked on mine. I don't know, Liam, he said, stepping closer. But I can't stop thinking about you. My breath caught as he closed the distance, his hand cupping my face. When he kissed me, it was like the world fell away soft. Urgent. Perfect. But then the door slammed. Ethan stood there, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. What the hell? He shouted, and my stomach dropped. Daniel stepped back, his face pale. Ethan, let me explain, he started. But Ethan cut him off. Explain what? That you're sneaking around with my friend. The hurt in his voice was a knife to my chest. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Ethan stormed out, and Daniel followed, leaving me frozen in the kitchen, my heart in pieces. I packed my bag that night, ready to leave, but Daniel found me before I could. Don't go, he said, his voice breaking. Not like this. We talked until dawn about his fear of loving again, my fear of ruining everything. He'd never been with a man before, he admitted, but with me, it felt right. I wanted to believe him, but Ethan's anger hung over us like a storm cloud. Morning broke, and Ethan was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway, and my heart sank. Had I lost my friend forever? Daniel and I sat on the porch, the weight of last night pressing down on us. I need to talk to him, Daniel said, his voice steady but pained. But I need you to know I don't regret this. I don't regret you. We drove back to Chicago in silence, the lake fading in the rearview mirror. When we reached Ethan's apartment, he was waiting, his face hard but his eyes red. I don't get it, he said, looking at Daniel. Why him? Why now? Daniel took a deep breath, his voice raw. Because he makes me feel alive again. Ethan, after your mom, I thought I'd never feel that way. But Liam, he's different. Ethan's gaze shifted to me, and I braced myself. I trusted you, he said, and the words cut deep. But then he sighed, his shoulders slumping. I need time. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Daniel squeezed my hand, and I felt a flicker of hope. Months later, Ethan and I were talking again, not like before, but slowly rebuilding. Daniel and I were cautious, taking things one day at a time, but every moment with him felt like a gift. We'd sit by the lake sometimes, just the two of us, and I'd marvel at how a single weekend had changed everything. Love, I realized, wasn't just about passion, it was about courage, about choosing to be vulnerable even when it hurt. The cabin became our refuge, a place where we could be ourselves, free from judgment. And as I looked at Daniel, his hand in mine, I knew we'd found something worth fighting for, a love that defied expectations, a love that made us whole.